Here we are at day 10 of 21 Days of Fear. And first and foremost, thank you all for those of you who have been messaging me about how these videos have been really great and transformative for you. And, you know, people are starting watch parties with them. So if you come in, start a watch party, share it with your community. You know, people are really experiencing a tremendous amount of value and benefits from these. So let us dive into day 10, where we're going to be talking about what positive things can come out of our fear. And this was actually inspired by a conversation that I had with one of my dear soul family, teacher, sister, allies. And a lot of times when we start to look at some of our deeper pains and traumas and fears and patterns that are just like not really serving our highest and best, and we know that, yet for all of the reasons that we spent the last 9 days building up to this moment, stop us from changing it. Because of all of these core beliefs and stories that are holding us into these fear modes. So what incentive do we have to create change in our lives, to actually shift these fears, to go into the darkness, we'll call it, or into our shadows, into areas that we have pain and struggle and challenges and suffering, right? What inspiration can there be? And that's where this question, is there any good that comes out of this? And the answer is absolutely yes. And the example that I want to use for this is the current president of the United States of America, Mr. Trump. So for those of you who didn't watch my video years ago about why it was necessary for this man to be elected into office for the healing to take place, you can go back and check that out if you want. That being said, we have had so much fear come to the surface of our awareness in the last 3 years as a collective than we have in a very long time. And things have radically changed. One of the things that has radically changed in a positive direction from looking at some of the really dark patterns of fear that have created separation in the United States and also rippling out to different places in the world, one of them being the pandemic of sexism. And through having this very fear-oriented person as this billboard for treating women in a certain way that is disrespectful, we started an entire movement called the Me2 Movement that allowed for women to reclaim their power and their voice, and it set certain standards for how men and women were going to interrelate to each other. And deep core wounds started to be healed. More healing has happened in these last 3 years than in so long. Massive healing. And this came through my awareness yesterday when I was having this conversation with, as I said, a friend who's living in another country in another part of the world. I'm not going to speak to what country that is, where she was just noticing how the way that she is treated by men in America and the way that she's treated by men in this part of the world that she's living now is very different. Where in this part of the world where she's living now, all of this fear didn't surface and the Me Too movement didn't happen there. So men are still overly sexualizing women and making inappropriate advances and being, you know, pretty crass in how they're connecting with her. And she's like, you know, since the Me Too movement happened in the US, this doesn't happen there anymore. We've created new agreements within the genders in this country, and things are starting to be processed and integrated and healed because we were willing to look at a deep, dark fear that was creating separation. And we had this billboard of a person that came out, and we were all like, whoa, if this type of person can enter into power, then what is happening in our world? What's the deeper traumas that are going on? And how do we course correct this? And a whole healing movement was started. And now there is a big shift between men and women in the US and in other parts of the world where this Me Too movement has gone. That hasn't happened in other areas where these fears haven't been looked at yet. So when we start to talk about our own journey and our own healing process, it can be frightening because fear, as I said in one of the first videos, is afraid of itself. It only knows fear, so it only knows how to show up as fear. And that very fear will stop us from going into the fears because it's afraid of itself, right? It's a cycle that just keeps spinning back and back and back on top of itself. So we must acknowledge what can happen through our willingness to approach our fears, through our willingness to show up and say, you know, I had this one message me last night, was like, I just realized I have this urgency to heal now that has been made revealed to me through these videos that you're putting out, through seeing all these different ways that fear shows up in my life that I don't even realize are fears, that I don't even realize are signs that there's an imbalance in my nervous system and an imbalance in my internal systems that are constantly creating these patterns that I really struggle with. So from that standpoint, we start to see the greater picture, and that's what it's really all about, seeing this greater picture for what can happen when we are willing to go into what we are afraid of in our lives, into our traumas, into our challenges, into the areas that keep creating dissonance in our life and anxiety and stress and pain and all the things, because there is always a gift that is waiting to be emerged through everything that you're doing. Always. And if we really truly remember that at all times, that there is a gift that is waiting to be emerged through our willingness to heal, then we can bypass that fear talk for a moment to get ourselves in the door. Because all we have to do is show up. If we show up for the practices or for the programs or the protocols or the changes or the counseling or whatever it is that we are resonating with as this is going to be a path that's going to help me to heal XYZ so that I can release these fears and change these patterns that have been creating a lot of suffering in my life. Once we show up and we enter the door, and to enter the door we have to first pull that fear that's afraid to enter the door out of the picture for even just a moment to show up. And once we show up, then we have that support that will keep us moving forward, that will keep us showing up for ourselves, even when that fear says, no, this is dangerous. Because we have to recognize that when we're running this constant fight, flight, or freeze program in our nervous system, in the sympathetic dominance, in protection mode in our neurology, that is the mode that we're operating through, which means that anything that's going to threaten that mode from continuing to be the predominant way that you're experiencing your reality through, which is actually healing, because healing will threaten that fight, flight, or freeze mode from operating, because once you're healed, you no longer need to be in that program of constantly being on the edge, right? Feeling like you're in survival mode. And a really great way to know if you're in constant fight or flight is you are living in survival mode. You feel like your resources are scarce, your time is scarce, your experiences are scarce, your relationships are scarce, all the things are in survival mode. You feel like you're just barely getting by. This is a great signpost, a great symptom of how our experience shows up to show us that we are likely operating from this sympathetic dominant fight, flight, or freeze mode. And once we realize that, we have a choice. The choice is to show up even when that program says, don't do it. It's going to threaten our survival. When in actuality, it will completely heal that so that you no longer need to live on the edge. I said in the last video, maybe it was the one before that, that stress is the leading cause for the top the six reasons that people die the most from in the United States, at least, is because of stress. So this is a huge, important thing for us to be recognizing. And, you know, for a while, I was living in a world where I was like, yeah, I don't really have any stress. I don't really experience stress. And the truth was, that was revealed to me through the healing journey that I went on in the beginning of this year, was that that stress was so chronic, was so ever present, that I didn't even recognize it anymore. I just always was tense and on edge because of the pain that I was in this program for, because of unhealed, unresolved traumas that created changes to the systems of my internal compass, my body, right? So we actually, once we're in that chronic stress mode, we might not even recognize our lives as stressful anymore, which is why the 21 Days of Fear, each of these videos is talking about different ways that this shows up in your life that you might not recognize. And you might hear Nomi barking at something outside right now. You might not recognize these things to be actually stress and actually fear, like procrastination, right? Did we trace that to our deeper fears and living in this freeze mode of our nervous system? So if you're just tuning in for the first time today, day 10 of 21 Days of Fear, go back and watch the first 9 videos, right? Each one is a stream of information for you to create little notes within yourself and to be a guiding compass on your path to recognize what is happening or what is not happening in your life, and to have a protocol, we'll call it, a method that is available for you if you choose to show up and commit to changing these patterns once and for all, and to commit to restoring balance to your internal systems, right? So yeah, for those of you who are wondering where you can find those videos, if you're on Instagram, it's going to be on my IGTV. If you're not on Instagram and you're on Facebook, you can go to the videos tab on my page, or you can hop into my IGTV. It's just Ahaumna. And they are being slowly uploaded to my YouTube page as well. That being said, IGTV or my Facebook page, to find those first 9 videos and to tune in and really start to see the deeper patterns that are happening in our lives, because without awareness, we don't recognize that we've been in these chronic patterns that just keep us living and just keep us surviving instead of thriving. So that is all for today, day 10. If you are wanting to know more about the journey that this is leading us into, which is through rewriting your future in the Fearlessly Expressed program, do send me a message or go and check out the link in my bio on Instagram, or for those of you on Facebook, it's rememberwhyyourhere.com/fearlessly expressed. And you can always just send me a message and I'd be happy to send you any links that you want or answer any questions that you have, because this is important to me and you are a part of it. Your healing heals me and my healing heals you. So I hope that you have a beautiful day or evening wherever you're at in the world, and I look forward to tuning in with you tomorrow for day 11. Bye.